is the Heritage Month on Air series, and I'm excited about today's conversation because we're going back to the beginnings of Ghana, being Ghana in the modern era. Now, we're looking at the transition of the Prime Ministership to Presidency. My name is David Citi, and of course, you know that the Heritage Month on Air series is brought to you by Miss Cookie Spices. No peeling, no blending, just scoop and cook. After this break, when we come back, I will introduce my guest to you and we'll get right into the conversation.
Ago.
All right, welcome back. And my guest this morning is the historian. As you have been enjoying the different episodes of the Heritage Month on Air series, you realize that he just has everything. He knows all of it. The historian, Kweku Dako Ankra, and we're going to be talking about the Prime Ministership of Nkrumah, and we transition into presidency. How did that all take place? Kweku, welcome again.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we understood, you know, when he became, this is Kwame Nkrumah we're talking about, Osajefo became Prime Minister and all of that. But there was a lot of things that happened. And eventually Ghana decided to move towards the era of the presidency. Take us through all of that and what actually happened.
Okay, so it all started in the Kuse constitutional reforms of 1948. The reform came out with modalities on which we will run the first elections in our exercise towards independence, and it earmarked the 51 as a tentative date for our first elections involving the entire Gold Coast, because there was certain mistake that was not addressed in the 1946 Alabama Constitution. 1946 Alabama Constitution legislatively added Ashanti Territory as part of the Gold Coast.
Okay.
So for the first time, two people were elected from there, Sir Ochira Safaje and I.K. Ajaman. We brought in to represent Ashanti. But the Northern Territories were not included in the 46.
Okay.
So Kose's constitutional reform added the Northern Territories as part of the Gold Coast. So around that time, we were to run the elections. This time, whoever emerges, the modality was in line with the British system of governance, what we call the Westminster system or the Prime Ministership system, where you have a Prime Minister and the monarch as the ceremonial head or the ceremonial head of state.
Okay.
So as it operates in England, Norway, and all other monarchical states in the world, you have the Prime Minister who will become the leader of government business. So he will run day-to-day activities of governance. But when it comes to ascending to the bills and what have you, the ceremonial head, who is the Queen, then will append the signature and give it that legal impetus for the law to become a reality.
So was the Queen still head of state whilst Kwame Nkrumah was Prime Minister?
So what was happening was that when Nkrumah became the, within this border, the Queen is in England. So he cannot operate directly here.
Okay.
So his representative in the Gold Coast, who is the governor. So the governor then becomes the ceremonial head of state, standing in as a proxy for the Queen.
Okay.
So that is the system that operated when we ran the 1951 elections, and Nkrumah won, and he became the leader of government business. Of course, because it is a Westminster system, a parliament came into existence, a parliament where some people were still coming in representing the chieftaincy, because at that time we have not developed the full election system where only, how do you call it, elected members alone. We were still driving towards representation by elective powers alone.
Okay.
So Northern Territories, for instance, when they were coming in, they were not represented by a political party, but they represented their constituents from where they are coming from. Out of which they founded the Northern People's Party. Because they were representing what we call the entities, the Northern Territories. So they came in that order into Parliament on attached to any political institution or a party.
Okay.
So they came. So the UGCC and the people who won there, as well as the CPP, who won overwhelmingly, because there were only 3 members that won from the UGCC at the time to be in. It was a landslide victory for CPP.
Okay.
So what happened was that Nkrumah then was elected easily as the Prime Minister and leader of government business. Sir Charles Quist, okay, Charles Edward Quist of Osu was also elected as the first Speaker of Parliament then, around that time. So Nkrumah ruled around that time as a Prime Minister with the governor then, was the name Aidan Clark, who was then having the oversight role as a representative of the Queen.
Okay.
So he was the ceremonial head.
Okay.
But the actual governance was in the hand of the leader of government business, as we see it being played out in the modern monarchy of Britain, and how the Westminster system is operating. So we're talking about the principles where there is a parliamentary supremacy with the Prime Minister as a head, and so on.
Yes.
So that was the system. And this operated in 52. We still operated the system. And Nkrumah won again, and he became the Prime Minister in the 1954 elections. In 56, when he won again, he was the Prime Minister, and the election was the next year, which is 57.
Yeah.
So he was ushered in as a Prime Minister. Until later, moves were made. Within this period, there were times that the governors were not around. Okay? So there were situations where, say, Akukosa, who was the Chief Justice, oftentimes acted as a Chief Justice. And in one time when Aidan Clark went and the new one was coming in, Kosa have to become the substantive Governor General of the Gold Coast. So I wrote my thesis on Akukosa. He was one time Governor of the Gold Coast, Governor General of Gold Coast, because in that lacuna where the substantive Governor General has not been brought from England, he has to act in that capacity.
As Chief Justice.
As a Chief Justice and also as a Governor General of the Gold Coast. It was in that capacity that when the governor wasn't there, that the Preventive Detention Act, for instance, it was signed by Akukosa, and his detractors often used it to attack him. That's why he being Chief Justice. He stooped so low to sign that, which is his act to supposed to do, because they do hand in hand. This is ceremonial head, though he can refuse, but it's constitutional mandate either to do or not to do. So you can argue the way you want to argue, but that was the principle, and it was so until 1960 when this country became a republic. 1st July when we became a republic, then the role, the oversight responsibility of ceremonial head went away, because we have become totally a republic that we want to do on our own.
So the question that comes to mind is, on the day of what we call independence, that 6th March of 1957, Kwame Nkrumah was still Prime Minister.
He was still a Prime Minister.
And the Queen was still officially the head
It was
state.
the head of state, yes.
But we were independent.
We were independent,
So
yes.
how does that work?
Yeah, so as it is, that is why Nkrumah fought for the idea of republic, that we need not to put or have our apple string still attached to our colonial oppressors. So what he was looking at is the independence, because mind you, Nkrumah has talked about black man is capable of managing his own affairs. So he was not bounded by any colonial strictures that will still place Africa in subservient situation. And he does not see the principle of being independent and still being under another person's power. It doesn't augur well. If you are independent, you must be truly be independent. And he means this politically. He means this economically. He means this culturally. He means this in every facet of individual life. And so for that thing to occur politically, all structures of colonial hand must be off, so that when we say we are independent, we are truly independent. And that is what he worked towards. And by 1960, he was able to achieve it as a republic. And so therefore, there is no head of state who is having any oversight responsibility over its former territory.
Now, when he becomes, so talk to us about what had to happen constitutionally and all of that for him to then become president, leaving aside the former head of state to say now Ghana, we have our own head of state, that's Ghanaian.
So that brought the First Republic. You know, we talk First Republic, now we are in Fourth Republic,
yes,
and the Fourth Parliament of Fourth Republic, and so on.
Yes.
So the First Republic,
Eighth Parliament.
Eighth Parliament, okay. Okay, the Fourth Republic and the Eighth Parliament. So because of the coup d'etats, we have had certain truncations.
Yes.
But in Nkrumah 1st July 1960, we had the First Republic. And that is when we have the first constitution that was drafted by the Constituent Assembly. We had our constitution, which is wholly Ghanaian, okay, to rule for ourselves. And we had a president, this time unattached to anybody. So the country has become a republic with its own constitution that was to run with it, with no attachment to any imperialist or any outside power. So sovereignty of the state indeed has come to the Ghanaians, and it is residing with the people, and not one single individual, but the Gold Coast themselves. So that is the First Republic that came into existence. And then we created the presidential form of government. And Nkrumah, in one of his speeches, says that ours is a hybrid form. Because when he created the presidential form, people were looking at it's going to be like United States, or what we see in Nigerian form.
Okay,
you have the Senate, you have the House of Representatives, and so on. That was the kind of thing they were looking at with regards to the Congress. So you have your Senate and then the representatives. But this was not it, because some people were looking for representation of chiefs. So double, or what is called a bicameral legislature. They were looking for that bicameral legislature sort of thing. But Nkrumah didn't do that. He maintained the Westminster system of parliament and also borrowed the American form of presidential system. So ours is a hybridized form of governance on its own.
All right, okay. So we're going to take a quick break. When we're back, we'll continue with this conversation in the transition from the prime ministership to presidency. Ago. All right, welcome back from that break, and we're still talking about the transition from prime ministership to presidential rule. All right, so this is very interesting times, Kweku. We've gone from a place where there was a monarchy as a head of state from England. At the same time, her representative was in Ghana as the Governor General. And then we now have a prime minister who handles government business. We've gone from that place to the place where we have a republic, and now the prime minister has become a president with a hybrid system of governance, borrowing from two different systems. But I noticed that in all the conversations we have, I don't see a vice president to this first president of the First Republic. What was going on here?
Okay, that is an interesting question. So, within the First Republic, something extraordinary or a convention was developed where this convention was a system or a body of people they call the Presidential Commission.
Okay.
So the Presidential Commission was some selected high-ranking members of government who came together. And from some of the archival research that I did when I was writing on Seaku Kosa, I realized that he was at one time head of the Presidential Commission.
Okay.
In their Presidential Commission meeting, particularly when the issue of the PDA came to the Presidential Commission for discussion, and Nkrumah was out of the country. And they were deliberating on how Terry Adamafio and others were using the PDA to attack some of their friends.
This is the Detention Act?
Yes, the Preventive Detention Act and so on later. So what was within the presidential system, when some of these issues came for discussion about the impact of some of these policies and so on, I realized that at that particular one, from the 1960, Kosa was the head of the Presidential Commission with Kojobo Otio and Komla Bulibodema. Later on, it changes. John Tatagan and other people also came to join the Presidential Commission. But I knew for a fact of Kosa being a chair of the Presidential Commission, and with Bodema, Komla Bulibodema, as well as Kojobo Otio around that time. So so many a times when Nkrumah travel, you see Kobinako Kosa, who was then the Chief Justice, acting as the Vice President.
So he was Chief Justice. He was also Chairman of the Presidential Commission, which then meant that he would be the one who would act.
Yes. So you see some places, some gatherings, some events. You will see Kosa going as a representative of the president. At certain stage, you see Bodema going as a representative because he also was a member of the Presidential Commission. So at any given time, in certain cases, you see Kojobo Otio going because they were the members of the Presidential Commission, and this body acted as the vice presidency of the republic at the time until the overthrow of the president. So this was the system that operated. So you will not pay as you want to see it on paper. There was not role of a vice presidency
as in
at
a
the
single
time,
person,
but there was a presidential commission which acted at that body at any time when the president is not there, at any time when president wants someone to represent him as his number two. The presidential commission acted at that body.
Okay, that's interesting. So the constitution, the first constitution of the First Republic, did it reflect this?
It was a convention that was developed out of the constitution to give this mandate. So it was something that really worked well. I think Nkrumah was, you see, governance itself is also a working in process. Because if you go back after Nkrumah, we realized that after the coup, 66, in 69, when Buzia came, he went back to the Westminster system. He went back to the Westminster system. And it really affected the kind of system that was the presidential and hybridized form with Westminster. So he go back to the Westminster system, where he was the governance have Buzia as just as Nkrumah ran as a leader of government business, running the day activities of the governance. There was also an election where Adontin Asafaje, Dr. Asafaje, contested with Edward Akufo-Addo. And Edward Akufo-Addo won, and he became the ceremonial head of state. So within that governance system, unlike Nkrumah's time, when the Governor General was the ceremonial head at the time, representing the monarchy, in the Second Republic, when it was reverted, we saw how do you call it, Edward Akufo-Addo emerging as a ceremonial head of state. So that is why when some people who are not aware of the workings of the government at that time, somebody will say Akufo-Addo was a president. He was not president. He never ruled this country. He was just like what you will say, like a vice president or just a ceremonial, like the way the Queen was. The actual leader of the Second Republic was K.A. Buzia, who was the prime minister. He contested the election with Progress Party and won. Edward Akufo-Addo did not contest any election. He was just a selected person.
But it seems to me that there was a bit of a challenge there because we've already transitioned to the Republic in 1960. We have Nkrumah as the president and head of state. So how do we then come back later
to the Westminster system?
Now the Westminster system, where Buzia is now head of government business with Edward Akufo-Addo as head of state?
So many were looking at the presidential system as giving overriding powers to Nkrumah to do whatever he wants with the parliament and the presidential powers. So bringing it to the Westminster system will move some of the powers, and then parliamentary supremacy
away from the president.
From the president, the parliamentary supremacy will now emerge. so that he cannot come out with certain arbitrary laws and regulation. And we could see that structures happening when certain rules came from the, how do you call it, from the Supreme Court. For instance, Alien Compliance Order, Apollo 568, when the workers, Buzia say, I will not even enforce what the Supreme Court is saying. If we were to be under presidential system, we would have been able to influence the Chief Justice at the time, because during Nkrumah's time, he was even able to appoint and dismiss judges and so doing. So these were things they were trying to curtail the power of the presidency at that time. And in so doing, they went back to the colonial way of doing things. And it's also it's something you got to understand. Buzia is a lover of British, everything British. So going very back to do the parliamentary sort of thing was something that also appealed to him. And most of the people who were also against Nkrumah were people who believe in the Westminster kind of governance. So when 1969 Constitution brought that one, Buzia became direct beneficiary of this system. And that is how we see Buzia becoming a prime minister, head of government business, running the government after winning the election with his Progress Party. And then election was done because he needed someone to act as his guide. You know, when you go to Germany, you have the president and you have the chancellor. So the chancellor is there ruling, and you have the president who is the head of the Senate and so on. So we were also trying to work and have somebody who is, because this country is not a monarchy. So how do you get somebody who will also serve as a ceremonial or the number two? Today we call it vice president. Before we were developing the concept of vice president, it was then the president. And then we have the prime minister. The actual number one person was the prime minister. President at that time means nothing. It was just a ceremonial head, just like a vice president, assisting the prime minister or the president.
Very interesting. I mean, it appears that we've been through quite a bit of an evolution.
Yes, the evolution is very important because it's a political journey. So we need to experiment some forms of governance. And then as we go through, we will get the best out of the kind of system that will best suit us. And even up to today, people still don't believe this presidential system is really helping us.
We feel as if there's too much power.
Yes, there's so much power to the president because initially these were things that the opponents of Nkrumah, from day one, the argument has always been that the presidential system gave so much power to the president, and that when they gain power, they will remove some of these strictures. Over the years, the president has gained more power than what Nkrumah was even having. So much that today, a president will sit in Accra, and you will have a representative in Hamile in the district assembly, and you call himself the president's appointee, when the president has never even seen his face. Before. And this is the kind of bizarre governance system we have in our country today. So the president has so much powers that he can even turn a man into a woman. There is nothing the president cannot do in this country. You see? And there is a lot of redundant conventions. And people, because they want political power and opportunities and the trappings of office, will forget their education, their training, their role as lawyers, judges, and come on and say, this is not the best way the country is supposed to go. So we have really, bring all the ugly side of democracy. Democracy, we are seeing it in our governance system, simply because we've not been able to develop the presidential system to get a model leader. Power belongs to the people. That is what people don't know. All the attack against Nkrumah, go and read the writings of Buzia, go and read the readings of J.B. Dankwa. They were saying that the fundamental right of the individual was being eroded. It was being encroached, and that the power belongs to the people because the sovereignty of the republic is in the people, not the president. Till today, since from the republic, Fourth Republic, it has always been with the president. People will die to support the president rather than to support the republic. And this is what we have had in this country. And it is not the best way to go. Any country that wants to do well, the power must reside with people. It is only when it is done so, that is when the leader, when you chose him, he begins to do what is right for the people.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Kweku. Darko Ankra. I've been speaking with historian Kweku Darko Ankra and on the transition from prime ministership to presidency. Very interesting story there. Of course, you know that the Heritage on Air series, both on Citi TV and Citi FM, is brought to you by Miss Cookie's Spices. No blending, no peeling, just scoop and cook. My name is David Kwekusechi. Next time, we'll be back on the Heritage on Air series.
Ago.